Hello, everyone, and welcome back into another episode of Tom SOX Today. I'm Eric Fenstermaker, joined alongside by Zech Lambert. We're here at Crutchfield Park, getting ready for another game of Tom SOX baseball. Zech, how are you today?
Doing great, Eric. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Like I said, it's always great when we get to come out here and watch some Tom SOX baseball. The Tom SOX are taking on the Staunton Braves yet again, and it's weird because although it was warm outside and the bats were hot, they weren't for Staunton. In this game, they only had 3 hits, were struck out 13 times for 1 run. Going into this game, they were averaging 9 runs per game, so Staunton was really held in check. Let's go to the highlights here to talk about what happened just a couple days ago. Staunton taking on the Charlottesville Tom SOX as we see the players lining up here, getting ready. Fans always packed here at Crutchfield Park, great to see. We're going to start off here in the 4th inning, and with bases loaded, 2 outs, Staunton's Justin Havey is going to bring in a run. It's the first run of the ballgame for the Braves. They're going to take an early lead, 1-0. Not a good sign for the Tom SOX right away.
Certainly not, and it was the walks that were a common theme through this game, walks and hit Batman.
We're jumping into the 5th inning here with 1 out. Garrett Spikes singles for the Tom SOX, getting some action from the bats. That's going to put a runner on with 1 out. Really good to see the Tom SOX here. And a couple batters later, Spikes now on second. His teammate Cam Guidry is going to knock him in. That's going to tie up the game at 1. Tom SOX immediately respond to that 1-run deficit. Now in the bottom of the 6th, a new pitcher in for Staunton. Just some really good pitching early on. You're going to see Cole Foster leave a leadoff double to put a runner in scoring position, get the Tom SOX back on bases, and then follow that up. It looks like it's going to be a double play here. Misplayed by the shortstop, Kent Rooklyn. Now the Sox have the first lead of the game, 2-1. Just a poor mistake there. And then followed up right afterwards. Next batter, Garrett Ebel. He's going to rip one past Rooklyn. Tom SOX now have all the insurance they need. They're up 4-1. Not a great inning for Rooklyn at all.
Yeah, and he would have another error later on in the inning to add another run.
Now, like you mentioned, Tom SOX pitching really, really dominant today. 13 strikeouts from 6 different pitchers. That's the most this season. Zach, dishing from the mound. Really great job by Tom SOX.
Yeah, I mean, these guys were just out there shoving. It was a combination of good breaking balls and real good life on all their fastballs.
In the 9th inning, Auburn's Will Morrison's going to step on the mound. One final strikeout puts it away for the Tom SOX. You can see the determination there. He wanted it. He knew he got it. Charlottesville's going to win 5-1. Zach, huge win over Staunton, who previously going into this game did not have a loss on the year.
Yeah, I mean, the pitching was really the story of the game. Charlottesville was able to strand 10 Braves on base, so Staunton, they had a lot of opportunities. They had the bases loaded twice, left them loaded twice. A lot of missed opportunities, though, and that is a little bit of a cause for concern if you're the Tom SOX, in my opinion.
I agree. Now, jumping into the performances, Charlottesville, like we talked about early on in the season, they do kind of start slow. It is maybe a little bit something to watch out for. I mean, they wait until the 5th or 6th inning. We've seen that twice at home now. Are you worried about Charlottesville's inability to get started right away?
Not really. So against Staunton, they were facing Ryan McCarty from Penn State Abington, and this is the type of pitcher that, a lot of these guys who go to the bigger schools like Auburn or Clemson, you're not going to see a guy quite like McCarty. He's not going to be thrown in the mid-90s like these other guys are, but he's got some sneaky good stuff. And, I mean, he was almost perfect through the first 4 innings. The only Tom SOX hit came on a weak ground ball that Mackenzie Pate hit in the first inning. So he looked really good. I think it was just a combination of good pitching, maybe out in front of the ball a little bit because they weren't used to as slow of a pitcher. But then once they get rolling, they show all the potential that they have.
Now, like we talked about, walks were a big story of this game. Also hit by pitches, just a ton of them. Staunton doesn't get a ton of batters on because they're hitting. They get a lot of batters on by unforced errors from the Tom SOX. How do you think that ultimately came into play in this game?
Well, I think the Tom SOX got pretty fortunate that Staunton was unable to cash in. I mean, the pitchers made big pitches when they needed to, but we talked about it. The only run of the game for the Braves came on a walk. I mean, in that inning, the Braves didn't even have a hit. It was 2 hit batsmen and 2 walks that resulted in a run. So Charlottesville did get fortunate that the Braves didn't cash in as much as they could because they left a lot of guys on base, had so many opportunities, but you could also look at it the other way where our pitchers made big pitches when they needed to if you're the Tom SOX. So whichever way you really spin it, it could be cleaned up, but also tip of the cap, we got out of these jams, but ultimately I don't think you want to be putting yourself in these jams, especially from free passes.
Exactly. Now, Bren Taylor and Kent Rooklyn were Staunton's 2 big bats going into this game. They combined for 4 strikeouts, and neither of them registered a hit in 7 at-bats. I think the Tom SOX big theme this year has been their youth early on, but it's also been their ability to adjust because we saw Carlos Rodriguez go in the first inning, hits a batter almost right away. Okay, it's not a good omen to start that out with that, but then he responds with a couple of strikeouts in just 2 innings pitched. We also saw some great starts and then some kind of poor falling off. So, Zach, in a league where every single at-bat is so vital, how do you see the Tom Sox responding in these different scenarios, especially when things don't go their way right away?
Yeah, you mentioned the strikeout right after the hit by pitch by Rodriguez. That was a very good way to bounce back, especially right at the beginning of the game. But the thing that really stood out to me was in the second inning, he had an at-bat against Gabe Jennings. Jennings worked at 3-2, fouled off a couple of tough pitches, and then Rodriguez threw his best pitch of the game, the hardest fastball we threw all day, right on the inside corner. Great pitch, got Jennings looking, and to me that showed kind of the resilience that Rodriguez has and kind of the resilience that these coaches are trying to put into this team, not giving up, just continuing to battle. And that strikeout of Ian Diaz after the Ryan McCarty hit by pitch to lead things off for the game also shows it. And, kind of them scoring in the late innings, too, shows the resiliency that they have. Yeah, we're down. Yeah, we haven't been able to hit the ball, but they don't give up, and they come through when they really need to.
Now, the Tom Sox are still getting to know each other. They're still building that team chemistry, but there are definitely a lot of players who are standing out. Mackenzie Pate's one of them. Zach, he's batting .455 right now. He has 5 stolen bases. He's kind of doing it all for the Tom Sox. We've seen different players come and go. Pierce Bennett had a really hot start to the season. He didn't do much against Staunton. We've seen some guys really kind of come and go. What does it say for a roster when on a given day one of your best players can kind of fall off and a different guy steps up? How vital is it to have guys that can really step in when things aren't going well, especially early on?
Oh, yeah, it's so important, and not even just guys like Pate. I mean, you look at guys like Brett Lindsey. Up and down this roster, it's so deep. And that's part of the strength of the Tom Sox is that you can insert anybody into any slot in this lineup and they'll play, they'll fit well, especially Mackenzie Pate. I mean, you mentioned the 5 steals, same with Pierce Bennett. Getting on base and being able to steal bases is so important for a team, and it's a bit of a lost art in today's game. But on the broadcast for opening day, I kind of got a feel for Mackenzie Pate of kind of like a Ricky Henderson type of guy. He got on first base and he immediately stretched that walk into a double. To have a guy like that on your team who can turn a walk or a single into a double or a triple and immediately put a runner in scoring position because of their speed is just so great to have. And guys like Cam Guidry too. He doesn't have as many stolen bases accumulated because he hasn't been here as long, but he's got the speed and potential to be an elite base stealer on this team. So speed is so important. I mean, we saw the Kansas City Royals win a World Series championship a few years ago basically on the backs of good bullpen pitching and stealing a bunch of bases. So it really plays for this team to have strong arms out of the bullpen, which we saw, 6 different pitchers, and speed to steal a bunch of bases.
Now, like you talk about the ability to steal bases, the ability to have a solid bullpen, that's been the Tom Sox bread and butter basically all season long. And what they did against Staunton was take away theirs. Staunton loves to steal bases. They're number 1 right now in the VBL. And the Tom Sox really took that away from them. They also had a couple of really strong batters. They took that away from them as well. So with the Tom Sox ability to bring in these talented pitchers, what's been your overall feel for that? Because it's definitely a different feel. A lot of other teams in the league are not doing what we're doing when it comes to pitching, where the Tom Sox are rotating in a bunch of guys, maybe just a couple of innings here and there. There's a pitch count for Rodriguez, stuff like that. A lot of people are letting their guys go. McCarty got to go, but Rodriguez kind of held back a little bit. What's been your overall takeaway from this Tom Sox pitching rotation?
Yeah, that's kind of one of the downfalls of getting these big school kind of guys is that a lot of the times you're not going to be able to run them out there as much as you would like. But my biggest takeaway is just that they have boatloads of talent down in that bullpen, untapped potential, guys that maybe struggled with 1 or 2 facets during the collegiate season. Maybe they weren't able to locate their breaking pitches the way they wanted to, or their fastball didn't have exactly the life that they were looking for, or they struggled with walks or command. Now they come here and they get a chance to just let loose. I've seen so many pitchers just being able to find their zone, find their groove, and really execute their pitches the way they want to. Carlos Rodriguez, I mean, he really, really, really looked good in that game against Staunton. It was a shame that he could only pitch 2 innings because, I mean, the life that he showed on his fastball in those 2 innings was otherworldly. It had so much pop out of his hand, and his breaking ball, I mean, it buckled knees in multiple times in just 2 innings. So everybody on this roster has unbelievable stuff. It's just a matter of if they can control it and contain themselves.
Now, I know we're here at Crutchfield Park, and there's no fans around us, but as we've seen for the 2 home games so far, there's a ton of people that come out to these games, whether they're sitting in the bleachers around us, they're sitting out on that hill. Zach, we're from PA. We're not from Virginia. We're not familiar with the area, but it's been really cool to connect with a lot of the more local people. What's been your takeaway from these fans? I mean, they've definitely been passionate. They've definitely been into it. You've seen the kids running around taking pictures with the mascot, really enjoying themselves. How has the ballpark feel been to you?
I mean, it feels like a minor league game to me. It really does, with just the atmosphere. The fans are into it. They really love their Tom Sox here, and it's so fun to get to be a part of this team for this season. I mean, you mentioned the hill out there. We might not be from Virginia, but that hill does kind of give me shades of a hill in Pennsylvania out in Williamsport, and it's so cool to see the fans sitting out up there. You know, you sit up here in the press box, you look out, there's fans everywhere you look. They're so into it, and, you know, it's awesome that they're all here for free, too, thanks to Carter Bank and Trust.
Definitely. Now, like we talked about, they defeated Staunton. Now they have to go up against them again. And Zech, you know, it's incredibly tough to play a team twice, especially when they're in your division, and especially because you just played them. Now going up against Staunton. Staunton's now 3-2. They've lost their last two, so the Tom Sox gave them the first loss of the year, and they fall yesterday as well. All time, the Tom Sox lead the series 20-16. We'll see Noah Overton for the Tom Sox. He has 2 innings pitched this season. He allowed a hit, 2 walks, and had 2 strikeouts. And for the Braves, it's going to be Reed Salata. He had 4 innings pitched, 6 hits given up, 2 walks, 3 strikeouts, and 4 earned runs. It's really interesting to me to see how this Tom Sox pitching goes in this series, but ultimately the Tom Sox now have even more pressure on them because they're repeating as the VBL champs, or trying to at least. Now they're trying to go up and beat an opponent 2 times in just a handful of days. How do you make sure that you don't let a team kind of get that revenge game and even it up 1-1?
You clean up the walks and the hit by pitches. I mean, the Braves only had 3 hits, so it's not like they were hitting the ball all too well against this talented bullpen. But like I mentioned a bunch of times, they stranded so many base runners because the Tom Sox were giving them so many free passes. It is very difficult to beat a team twice in a row, and to do that, you have to play a good game. You know, Staunton kind of didn't really help itself with a bunch of errors, a bunch of miscues. I mean, there's no way that the Tom Sox should have scored all 4 of those runs in the 6th inning. A couple of surefire double play balls that, you know, obviously you cannot assume a double play, but tailor-made balls for double plays that were not turned. A couple errors. I mean, it was just not a good game in the field from Staunton, and you're going to have to assume that they're going to clean that up. So if you're Charlottesville, you have to clean up your errors. They didn't make actual errors, but for a pitcher, in your head, a walk or a hit by pitch is a free pass, kind of almost an error in a way. You clean those up, and I think they're going to be in a good spot because they showed that they have the arm talent to beat Staunton, but it's just a matter of fixing these little, you know, walks, hit by pitches. You can't give teams extra outs and extra base runners, especially a team as talented as Staunton.
Yeah, Ryan McCarty was doing a really good job. When he comes out of the game after giving up a run, the next pitcher came in. He didn't even retire 2 batters. He pitched for .1 innings, gave up a ton of runs. I believe his final ERA that game was around 81. So, you know, like you said, the Tom Sox are not going to get that kind of break, but they're going to be looking to repeat against Staunton, a team they're going to see plenty this season. As we look ahead at the rest of the season, and at least the rest of the next upcoming week, it's a very, very, very intriguing schedule for the Tom Sox. They have Harrisonburg on Saturday, again, one of the opponents they'll see very often. And they have a matchup against Front Royal. And Zech, I want to ask you about that team because Front Royal is one of the teams the Tom Sox will play this year, and they're only playing once. They'll have a doubleheader on Sunday, first one here at home. But you only play this team basically one day, 2 times. How do you go about preparing for an opponent like that? Because Staunton or some of the other teams you'll see, you'll play them multiple times. You'll get a chance to adjust, get a feel for them. This Front Royal team, you'll see them once. And if you make an adjustment after the first game, maybe it was just kind of a fluke. Like, how do you get a feel for a team that you're only going to play one game and have to make adjustments right away half an hour later?
Yeah, I mean, the awesome thing about baseball, I mean, and that's a great question. I think the awesome thing about baseball, though, is that you can kind of just prepare very similarly for almost every team that you face. And if you go in there and you do your own thing, you take care of your business, you do what you have to do, a lot of times a team especially as talented as Charlottesville, you're going to win a lot of games. So I think don't try to reinvent the wheel. This is a great team with a lot of talent. You go in there, you do what you can do. You know, if you're doing more of a pitcher by committee type thing, you're going to see a bunch of guys out of the bullpen. Continue to do that. If you're going to try to get on and steal bases, go ahead and continue to do that. Just keep playing your game and don't really let the other team dictate what you're going to do because this team is too good to kind of let their game plan fall on the shoulders of other teams. So I think if they just continue to roll, continue to play their own style of game, it's going to be really good. And Another thing is, don't sweat it too much based on the result. You do only play this team one time, so if for some reason, they lose both games, hey, you know what? It's 2 games in a long season, so don't overthink it, don't oversweat it. Everything's going to work out,
Now, starting with this Harrisonburg team, they have 13 games in 11 days. Zach, I know we're still getting adjusted to the heat, but these players have got to be feeling it playing so many games. With a stretch like this where you're playing quality opponents, especially division teams, you're not playing the Front Royals, you're playing the guys like Covington, Staunton, you're playing them multiple times. You really have to win a lot of these games to keep pace in your divisions and really look impressive. How do you keep your mental game up, especially when you're going on the road, you're staying at home, but you're playing just a plethora of games in a very, very short span?
This is one of the other beautiful things about baseball is just how compacted the schedule is, but it is tough, it is grueling, and these guys are going to feel it. It's really going to kind of make or break this season, I think, this stretch. And it's going to be really difficult, of large part because of, you mentioned, the heat. It's extremely hot, and, these guys are going to get tired, but kind of a mental toughness type of thing. Gut check, you wake up, all right, got a game tonight, prepare for it, just go about your business, and see what you can do. Obviously, you want to win all 13 of these games, but realistically, you're not going to win all 13 of these games. So keeping your pitchers fresh, keeping the arms loose, making sure the bats stay good, and just rotating. You got a lot of talent. You got a lot of guys on this roster that can play multiple positions. If a guy needs a night off, you give a guy a night off and get him back in there the next day. So I think this stretch, even though it's early in the season, could make or break the season really just because of how many games are in so few days. You let one slip, you let 2 slip, next thing you know, it could be 4, 5, 6, and all of a sudden, you got an uphill battle.
I agree. As we look out there, you can see the grass being cut at Crutchfield Park. It's just a beautiful place to be, and hopefully we can keep this rain away so we can get the game in tonight. We're playing the Staunton Braves. Charlottesville leads this all-time series, like I mentioned, 20-16. Staunton's fallen off a bit. Charlottesville's looking great. Zach, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Can't wait to get some baseball tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm hoping that the rain stays away, like he said, and we should be in for a great game, and looking forward to this big stretch of games too. It's going to be fun to see these guys play a bunch of games.
Now the Charlottesville Tom Sox will take on the Staunton Braves tonight. First pitch is at 7 p.m. Like Zach mentioned, all the games this season are free admission thanks to Carter Bank and Trust. So for David Argo, Zech Lambert, and the entire media team, I'm Eric Fenstermaker. Thanks for listening, and we hope to see you out of the ballpark tonight to get another great game for Tom Sox baseball.